welcome to the inaugural, technically the third recording of a Just Listen to Jack podcast. I'm just going to go with that.
Just go with it.
Just to keep with the branding, we're going to go with Just Listen to Jack, the podcast. Dun, dun, dun. But this is the inaugural episode. We have a new camera. We got some lighting in place. We moved some things around. We are the setup here is a work in progress. So we're hoping to get some better backgrounds and some better noise reduction in here. So hopefully this doesn't sound too echoey. But so I just kind of wanted to give you a brief synopsis of what the point of this podcast is, because I think every podcast probably needs to have a direction, right?
Kinda. Sometimes they're kind of boring because I got to admit that I stumbled upon a podcast and they started explaining about like what their podcast was about, and I'm like, unsubscribe.
Jeez, I don't want that to happen. I better just keep it short and sweet.
Let's just keep it short and sweet.
So, first of all, I want to introduce one of my co-hosts, Daniel Torres, and he will be joining me on this crazy podcasting adventure. Couldn't have done it without him, so I want to thank you in advance, Daniel, for
thanks.
The lighting and the mics and the mixer and and being my co-pilot here. I appreciate you. A little background on Daniel. We've known each other for about 15 years, 14 years around there. Yeah. So I can't think of anybody else that I'd want to go on this little journey with, because he's one of my creative partners in crime. And just kind of going back to what the podcast is about, the podcast is going to be a very positive, very lighthearted, kind of dealing with a lot of issues that I'm passionate about. So just to give you kind of a brief overview, give you a little insight into the mind of Jack Gonzalez Flores, is I'm very passionate about art. I'm very passionate about nerd culture. I'm very passionate about a lot of social issues. And most importantly, I'm passionate in what you'll see what the foundation of this podcast is positivity and living your best life. So a lot of people that I will have on here as guests, and we'll be really talking about the things that I'm passionate about, but with a focus on self-development and positivity, and just kind of navigating life and keeping things very light and positive, so that you can, reach a level of, reach a level of self-awareness that is, I think, integral in kind of getting and dealing with this crazy life, crazy world that we live in.
Yeah.
So, hopefully you'll get a little piece of insight from me and my guests that I have on the podcast, and maybe you'll learn a little something. That's just the goal, and just to get the message out there.
Yeah.
So, so we're just gonna kind of start this off and just kind of talk about, what. Let's just kind of jump on the nerd life. Me and Daniel are really big nerds, but we're kind of old school nerds because we're a little bit old.
I actually created a word called nerd dork, and
Nerd
combine both words together. So for a while I was referring myself as a nerd dork.
A nerd dork?
Nerd dork.
Nerd dork. So it's one word or two words?
Nerd dork.
Nerd dork.
Nerd dork.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, so, and it's mainly because people have told me the same thing, that I'm either a dork or I'm a nerd. And I'm like, I don't know how to feel about that.
They're one and the same.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah, I think it's like they're one and the same. I mean, if you're a nerd, although I have met some hot nerds or some gamers.
Gamers?
That's a word that is relatively new. It's a gay gamer. So it's a Gaymer. So a couple of people that I follow online and on Twitter are considered gamers.
Okay, so why did they choose to get the word gamer? Is it just a play on words, or is it just they're
I think
trying
it's
to
a play
own
on words.
something?
Yeah, I think
What
it's a
is
play
it?
on words. I mean, okay, here's my wackadoo philosophy. Like, because I've met some men who they were either one of three things. They were either super nerdy, and this is in full disclosure that they might be gay or they might not be gay. It was hard to tell because they were either one of three things. They were either extremely nerdy and like to themselves. They were ultra religious,
Ultra
religious,
Okay.
and they were they were just very friendly and like very like they were like wanted to talk to you and stuff, and I'm like, okay, this guy's either hitting on me or he's trying to sell me some religious bullshit. It's one of the two things. And it's particularly Mormon men.
Really?
Yes, because they're very friendly. They come to the door, they're very friendly, and you're thinking, oh.
I've never seen a Mormon knock at a door. I've seen them on bikes all the time.
Oh no, they well, I don't know. I mean, I live in the hood, so like they're probably thinking this is where people need salvation.
This is where their
coming to the
outreach
hood.
strategies come up.
So they're very friendly, so I'm thinking, okay, they're either ultra religious or they're gay. Because there's just giving you mixed signals. I guess that's what it is. It's like they're giving you mixed signals. So I'm kind of like, are they a nerd? Are they religious? Or are they gay? and actually I found one that was both, where I was like very confused about this person that I went to high school with. And I met him several years later, and he was always come to my church, and it's so positive, and we got a great band and choir, and like he was like the minister is awesome, and he was just trying to sell me on this dream, and he's like, yeah, we should hang out, like come meet me over here so we can go out and talk about this and stuff. And I thought, you know what, I said, he's trying to he's just giving me some strange vibes. Years later I did find out that he was gay, and he was actually trying to like hit on me, and I didn't even know this because
Really?
it was under the guise of his religious
Of the Lord.
Exactly. So I'm like, you just never know. Are you straight? Are you gay? Are you bi? But you know what? It doesn't matter, right? Do labels really matter?
I'm not really big on the label guy. I think labels tend to box people in.
Yeah.
And I don't like that whole boxing in. That's why I asked you. I'm like, is it something that's like, I don't know, what's this gamer thing? Like,
yeah, it's like, I guess people try and self-identify. When they want to feel part of a group, I think it's a natural thing to want to identify as something. And, if you identify with a group, then you feel you belong.
I agree because, I although I say I'm not really big on labels, I cringe when I hear, like, I don't do any labels. Why can't we all just be a human being or something? I'm like, oh God, like that's just, to me, if I feel very hippie just like hearing it. Like I'm becoming a hippie when I'm hearing that.
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing wrong with it, but it kind of like it masks the whole fact that we have so much differences, And so, yeah, ideally we could be all human beings, but geez, is there a lot of differences?
I mean, I think there's labels that come with some controversy because, I mean, if you want to call me a Latino, I'm a Latino. I don't.
Y'all third generation Latino.
Yeah, I'm a third generation Latino, and I'm fine with being labeled as so. I mean, are you okay with being called Latino or being called Hispanic or Mexican?
I don't really care. When some people might call me Latino, others Hispanic. I've been called like Indian and Arab, and
motherfucker.
I've been called I've been called every name in the book. Oh my God, that I have. But I just play with it. I mean, how many people have thought I was like Indian? And, so they're like, oh, you're not Indian, or you're not one of us. They always say, you're not one of us. And I'm like, no. I was like, prove it to me. Show me your ID card. And then so I show them my ID card, and they trip out. They're like, oh, well, you have blood like us, or they're trying to give me a discount still.
Oh, okay. Hey,
So
in that case, I'll be whatever you want me to be.
That's my
for
strategy.
A discount. For a discount,
I swear the guy
you can
gave
label
me a
me however you
discount.
want.
Well, this was after he was going to give me a discount already.
Yeah.
He speaks to me on his language. I don't understand him. And then so he ended up giving me a discount anyways afterwards. They always seem a little disappointed, though.
Yeah. Oh, man, like, well, I guess he didn't wholeheartedly give you his discount because you weren't one of him.
I know.
One of them. But, yeah, I mean, I think labels serve their purpose. I mean, but, I guess people have a problem with labels when the label comes with preconceived notions or it comes with some kind of stigma. So I think that's when labels become a problem. But for me, full disclosure, I'm a gay Latino living, I'm a double minority. I consider myself a double minority. And honestly, my sexuality or my ethnicity is just a part of who I am. This is how I always tell people. I mean, it's not who I am. It doesn't define, in my eyes, it doesn't define who I am. In other people, I've been defined as so, but that is not how I define myself. So, when I meet people, when I talk to people, I mean, if they realize it on their own, well, then good for them. They're observant. But, I don't feel like I need to give them my whole full stats upon meeting somebody. I mean, doesn't that take the mystery out of
You don't think
getting
that
to know
people
somebody?
do that, though? Like when they figure a piece out, or they see you that you're a different color or different, social class or whatever. You don't think that with those particular labels, they don't box you in?
I mean, I think that's just to make themselves feel comfortable. If they feel that they need to do that for their own comfort level, I mean, what do you call that, though? What do you call somebody in 2019 who is defining you as so, or needs to know what you are?
I don't know. I don't have a problem with labels, but I've noticed that in this super sensitive culture we live in now, I feel like people make labels a big deal. For example, like the people that feel like they're, I don't know, here I go being controversial again, but I feel sometimes like people that claim the oppression are the ones that are the quickest to go and label other people very harshly. Yeah. And they kind of close themselves up. So I think it's become kind of like a blade of, what's that expression? The sword of double-edged sword.
Double-edged sword. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just to me it looks, in the times we're living, in the political times, in the cultural times, to be dealing with this still, to me, it appears that this is stuff that has been, simmering, brewing, and now it's starting to bubble and boil, because, and I'm just going to say it, that, I still feel like in 2019, I still feel like racism exists. And maybe I didn't feel this way about 3 years ago. Maybe I felt like we've progressed. That we've surpassed it, that there's not that much closed-mindedness, or that we haven't evolved enough in the past 100 years to still label and to still have preconceived notions about a group of people. But I have to say that my opinion has changed in the last 2 years, just from where we're at politically. Some of the things that that have happened with police brutality and terrorism, and I'm talking about our own turf. I'm not talking about terrorism on a global scale. I'm talking about our own people terrorizing each other.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, and even I'm gonna reference the Jussie Smollett case. You know,
Oh God.
I know that's a
Jeez.
real slippery slope.
Let me hear it because we never talked about it.
Yeah, we never
really.
talked
Okay,
about
so
it because
that's
that had actually kind of encompasses, you know, somebody with who's multi-labeled, who's minority, a multiple minority. And if for you, those of you who don't know, who've been living under a rock, but Jussie Smollett is, you know, a gay black man. He's an actor on a TV show, and he was allegedly, full disclosure, allegedly, this is my legal note.
Yeah.
He has denied any charges or any false wrongdoing of reporting a crime. But the details, do you know what the details of like what happened to him? And, you know,
I mean, when Chris Rock is calling him out and other comedians, you gone and messed up.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of surreal, but, you know, allegedly he was attacked by 2 males. That's still debatable.
Well, they said 2 males with MAGA hats, and
With MAGA hats.
I was gonna say sprinkled. They
threw
bleach on him.
Yeah.
They put a noose on his neck. They were saying like MAGA country stuff, things like that. And the thing that's kind of odd about it is that he waited or something, or by the time the police got there, he still had the noose around him.
Yeah.
It was just some discrepancies in his story that really made the national news eventually. Everybody, when it happened, everybody's very sympathetic across the board. It's just like, this shouldn't be happening in 2019.
Exactly.
But he got caught up in some controversy afterwards. So I don't know. Go ahead. I don't want to.
No, I mean, it's just, you know, the things that were, like Daniel said, he had a noose around his neck. He was beat up. His attackers were yelling MAGA country, as well as they were wearing Make America Great Again hats. So this was just, had a lot of layers to it. There was a lot. I mean, you're covering racism and discrimination on so many levels in this one attack that it seemed contrived to me. In my opinion, it seemed contrived. It seemed unreal that this many things could happen in a situation that pushed so many buttons, that covered so, you know, kind of where, really speaking to where we are at right now. It just covered a lot of things all in this one attack.
It kind of reminded me back in the day where certain movies were becoming more popular, and I would joke around and be like, man, like extreme sports, like, you know, those skateboarding things is really hot right now. Zombies are really hot. Terrorism,
right?
And I'm like, why don't you just make a movie of like a extreme skateboarding zombies?
Yeah,
yeah, that's what it seemed like.
That is a perfect analogy. Yeah, exactly. It was like you couldn't have wrapped it up in a better package to really describe where we're at right now in the country. So it was a little sketch. In my opinion, I don't believe, based on the evidence that was given to me, I don't believe that. I do believe it was staged. I believe it. I'm saying it right now. I mean, somebody's going to come out from behind this camera right now and strike me down or take me away.
Dang, okay.
But I believe it was staged. Now, all charges were dropped.
Yeah.
But the circumstances as to why they were dropped is still, you know, questionable. He had a good lawyer. Just saying. He had a good lawyer. I think it was Mark Garagos. I don't know if you know who he is, but he was he's like a pretty, you know, he's like one of those lawyers, like, you know, I like to call them, what do I call them? Fire chasers. You know, they kind of jump on very like controversial cases, like Gloria Allred and with her daughter Lisa Bloomberg.
Well,
and
one of them happened with
Michael
this,
Avenatti.
I know he's right up there. Well, he is one of those. Like
Yeah.
the guy that murdered Nipsey, he's
Yeah.
being represented by a famous lawyer.
Oh.
At least that's the last thing I heard. I might
Yeah.
be wrong, but it's things like that.
So apparently he, Jussie Smollett, I don't think he did get fired from Empire. I think he's, they're on hiatus right now, but he is coming back for the next season. So I don't know. It's hard to tell at this point how it's affected his, because he went to the BET Awards. He was presenting, I think, there. So, I mean, he's not letting this case, and he stands by his word. He still claims his innocence, and he's not letting it stop him from being out as a celebrity. I don't know. It's hard to say right now how it's affected his work and his credibility as an actor or his reputation in the industry. That's yet to be seen. But as far as I know, he's going to be back on the set of Empire for the next season.
So you put it this way. Okay, so let's just assume that your hunches are right and he faked this whole thing, things like that. And he's been going on with a straight face from beginning to end. Yeah. What does that say? Does that say that he's a little off, or does that say that he's a brilliant actor of some sort? Like he
went on the record. Yeah. He went on GMA. He had a one-on-one with Robin Roberts where he maintained his innocence. And the thing is that he went from 16 counts of 16 counts to zero to being, I guess we would call it, exonerated.
Oh yeah.
He's not in jail. I think that he agreed to pay a fine and like his lawyer fees or so. It came out to something like $10,000.
Well, the city's trying to have him pay like $135,000
for like the resources used and all of that. Yeah.
And so I think he messed up. I mean, if he's innocent, he's innocent, and I could see why he's not wanting to pay anything. But if he's not innocent, it would be a good idea to just pay the money and move on, because now that he said he refuses to pay for it, it's becoming more of a big deal. You got to think in consideration that the chief is like totally like not on what's his name? Smollett's side.
No.
The Emmanuel, the mayor, and they thought this was handled totally wrong.
Yeah.
And then Fox, which is the one that got him off the hook, she is now there's this side of a bunch of chief of police that got and signed some letter or whatever, that they lost confidence in her. So right now the politics in Chicago are really strained because of this case, and it wasn't processed right. Yeah. Maybe if it was processed and then they found out that he was innocent, that nobody would care. But when they just sealed the case, nobody could investigate anymore. No. Nobody could talk about it anymore. That's pretty shady.
Yeah. So, he had some people working overtime for him, or maybe he got out from a legal loophole. I don't know. But to go from 16 counts, felony counts, to zero, to exonerated, to the case dropped, signed, sealed, delivered. I don't know. The question I want to ask you, though, is we look at somebody like Roseanne, a celebrity who is white, and she fucked up. She said some things. She lost her show. She paid a great deal for things that she said. Do you think, because Jussie Smollett is African American, do you think that he was treated differently? Do you think that there was a little bit more care in handling his case for, alleged things that he did to kind of create this uproar, to create this narrative?
I'm gonna turn the table upside down. I don't think it's because of that. I actually think it's because she's a conservative. I do think so. I think that conservatives tend to have a harder time with these kind of things. I don't know what it is about it, but people that are on the left tend to be able to make a little bit more mistakes in the public eye, and people tend to just kind of still support them and not make a big deal out of it. Because when I looked at the Roseanne case, I mean, it was a really bad choice of words, but I mean, they were literally putting, like, she kept saying she didn't know she was like African American, and I didn't know either. I forgot about how the lady looked like, and so they were trying to like spin it like she actually looked like the character from the movie. I could see the similarities because of the hair, things like that, but it's like it was such a crude, bad joke.
Here's the thing with Roseanne. Okay, first of all, comedians' jobs, their role is to comment on culture.
Yeah.
Most comedians are very intelligent.
Yeah.
They're very well read. They need to know who people are, what their role is, so that they can make a joke, they can comment, they can spin it. For Roseanne to sit there and say that she didn't know who she was, and not only for her to say that, but somebody who ran a presidential campaign herself, she knows who these people are politically. I don't think that for her to say she didn't know she was black, I think that's
a kind of like a cop out.
It's a cop out.
What she should have done, in my opinion, she should have just doubled down, and she should have said, "I'm a comedian.
Yeah,
this is what I do."
Right.
Because mostly every comedian out there was supporting Roseanne, and they're like, "Yeah, well." And on top of that, we are in the same age category. We grew up in the same era.
Long time ago.
I know, long time ago. We know who Roseanne is. Maybe these younger people might not know, but we know what kind. Have you not seen her stand-ups? Have you not seen her speak? She has this foul mouth.
Right.
That's Roseanne. Was I shocked when she did that tweet? No, I don't think nobody was shocked.
No, that's the thing.
But there was a small. Well, I wouldn't say small. There was enough people that did not like that comment that it was made into a big thing, and they probably had enough of Roseanne. She probably said too many things because. I'm not trying to defend Roseanne, but Roseanne, she digged her own grave kind of because she was going on like a campaign of tweets at the time. And so that was just that last tweet.
For me, like, I consider myself very a late bloomer, just talking about relationships and romantic relationships. I mean, I wasn't even interested in that. I wasn't even thinking of that in high school, much less junior high. I was still playing video games and hanging out with my friends, and like that wasn't even crossed my mind. And I think that when it did, when I was put in that situation, I was very uncomfortable with it. Didn't know how to react. There was this girl I remember when I was a sophomore in high school that she really liked me and she's pursuing me, and she was like, and I mean, yeah, I was like, she wanted to kiss me and everything, and I was like, what's going on here? It was like, and on the flip side, I mean, if it had been a guy, I would probably be the same. I was like,
the same awkwardness.
I was like, it had nothing to do with the fact that she was a girl. It was just the fact that I was like, what are you doing? I was just over here drawing my comic books and like, freaking, I don't know, picking my butt or something. I wasn't even doing anything. Like, she's over here trying to slip me the tongue, and I'm like, what the heck? Wow. I just felt like I was losing my childhood at that moment. And it just was really awkward for me. I was very embarrassed, and I just thought, like, gosh, and then even after graduation, like, I went to prom. I mean, I went to prom because I wanted to hang out with my friends, not because I was, I did have a prom day. I did go to my senior prom. I went with a very beautiful girl, but I didn't try and kiss her or anything. I didn't even think I even tried to dance with her sexually or anything. during high school, I was just not, that's not where my mind was. So I just um, was like just a late bloomer. I mean, I don't know. Like, where were you in high school? Were you even thinking of those things? Were you even like,
I swear I was literally playing video games like
Yeah.
most of every young person back then. We were still caught up in the arcade revolution
Yeah.
and not going back to nerd
I
stuff.
know.
And
See, I mean, maybe it was just us. Maybe it's with nerds.
no, we were so preoccupied with like other things. And
Yeah.
I was just like you. I was drawing. I have an art background too. And I was literally playing basketball with my friends and like just horsing around and things.
Yeah.
And in fact, when one of our friends got a girlfriend, then we're like, ugh, like
Yeah,
she's
kind of
like
like she's breaking up the crew.
like if they would say Yoko Ono back then.
Oh shit.
Yeah, like she's
Seriously.
breaking up the Beatles basically. And so we had a hard time with our friends dating. And so eventually it happened, but I think that those days are different. They're nowhere absolutely the same as right now. Right now it's just different ball game, different era.
Completely. Like, I feel worried and scared, and like it gives me anxiety about like what they're like dealing with now, and like
They're dealing with a lot.
yeah, they're dealing with a lot, and I just can't even fathom having to deal with the things, the subjects, and what they're exposed to at that age. How was the school like that you went to? Like, like, let's just talk about high school, kind of just keeping with, you know, uh, with older,
The old world.
yeah. What was your high school like? What would you consider it,
I grew up in an area where there was two kinds of people. There was the Latinos, mostly Mexican background, and then you had whites. And in our city, we were all mixed together. We had to grow up in an environment that it was weird. I could see the different class. I grew up in an environment like that. I never felt that. I never felt like I couldn't get along with anybody. I mean, I felt like I could get along with anybody. And when we went to high school, I already heard of different experiences of Mexicans fighting whites or whites fighting Mexicans, or like little school fights. So I grew up in kind of that era. Was it a big deal? No. Was it more than what it was? No. But when you're younger, you're more impressionable and you see things differently. And when and since I grew up in a very super farm community, like farm worker community, most of the farm workers were Mexican. And so that's also another thing that played in this dynamics of like, brown people are usually the ones that had these kind of jobs, etc. Yeah. And so it was mostly about like not being poor. Like that's this like the more like how people acted and reacted. I'm talking about like friends and classmates and things like that. They didn't want to be perceived as like they were second class citizens per se.
Yeah.
So going into my high school years is like we're coming out of one of the worst gang era in the city, gang timeline of our city. And so I had to deal with some of that. I had to deal with people getting shot. I had to deal with gang violence. So we were looking at, and the thing is, white people weren't doing that. It was Mexicans within where I was at. We had two big gangs that were in the city, and when we were having that gang problem, it was actually a turf war among one gang.
Yeah.
Yes, which was crazy. And so my high school was just a place where I felt like it was a prison. I still talk to my classmates, and I said, right. Do you guys remember like they used to have barbed wire
Wow.
like all around the high school? They're like, dude, you're tripping. There was nothing like that. And to this day, I feel 100% that it had barbed
Barbed wire.
wire around the school. But
Yeah.
that's just how I felt.
You perceived it. Yeah.
I felt like I was in a prison. I felt like I was slipping between the cracks in the
Yeah.
high school. I didn't feel like I felt like that Mexican guy that just fell behind on his studies. Like I could relate to. That's why when I worked in the high school, man, like everybody, like I'm like, I know, I see you.
I see you.
I was you back in the day,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just it wasn't like a really positive experience for me. High school, I literally was drawing from first period to sixth period. If I was lucky, behind and the last row of the classroom,
Yeah.
and that's how all my 4 years of high school were.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like a gloomy cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I could say that high school was magnificent and
I know. I always feel, hear stories of people like, oh, they had such a great high school, and I mean,
with school.
yeah, with school. I mean, the thing is with my high school is I went to a very good high school. It was in a good neighborhood. It had outstanding academics. It was very students were very involved in sports and music, so it was a very competitive school. And I straight came from the barrio. I mean, I moved to Fresno. Are we saying where we are? I guess we are now. I just exposed us. But I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and I moved here. Like, it was the worst time to move. I moved to Fresno 8th grade, second semester. So I came right in one semester between junior high and high school. So I went to my junior high in LA, which was it's like what you see in these freaking gangbanger movies, like Boys in the Hood, or like,
what's that one with James Olmos?
It was like one of those schools.
Stand and Deliver.
Stand and Deliver. Yeah, it was like one of those schools where it was just gang ridden. Walk a straight line. Don't look at anyone.
Yeah.
Don't make. I mean, it was a jungle out there, and that's part of the reason that my family moved to Fresno, is because it was just there just wasn't very many opportunities education wise. So coming to Fresno, I went to also an upscale junior high for only a half a semester, or for one semester, and then spent the most horrific summer that I've ever experienced, because Fresno is like triple digits here in the summer, and then went to high school, which was a complete culture shock. So I was completely out of my element in every way, shape, or form. I wasn't I learned very quickly on in high schools to blend into the background. I was not trying to. I was nowhere near that at that level of status. These people had been known each other since elementary school, and like pretty much the elementary school, the high school, and the junior high are relatively, like, the elementary school's right across the street and the junior high is just down the street. So all these people pretty much stay in their bubble. So I felt out of place. And it was a lot of white people that went to the school. And it was very much just dealing with the culture shock aspect of it, just trying to, not being particularly outgoing in high school and being kind of chubby.
You were chubby?
Yeah, like my freshman year, I was chubby. I probably like thinned out in sophomore year, but that first year was really tough. And, just dealing with the politics of high school that I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't prepared to be a loner. I wasn't prepared to just hide, blend into the background. I had on the flip side, over there been going, known people since elementary school, since preschool. And then I come over here, I don't know anyone. And not being, like I said, particularly outgoing or particularly charming. The only thing I had was my artwork to kind of fall back on. So, that's kind of what I was dealing with in high school. It kind of, I feel like high school kind of stunted me going into adulthood because I was so like traumatized by it that going into adulthood, I was just kind of stunted. I was like on paper, I looked good. I had my license, I had a job. I moved out relatively early into my own apartment when I was 19. But emotionally and mentally, I was stunted. So I was still like, even though I had my own place, I was responsible, had a job, had a little bit of money in my pocket. I was still playing video games. I was still playing basketball, skating, riding bike. I was still like a big kid. And so like was severely underdeveloped in that department, even though like on paper I was like adulting. So I probably didn't even start, adulting until like maybe like 10 years ago, if we're going to be honest, because I've just always been a late bloomer. I think a huge part of it had to do in high school. And that's why I kind of like wanted to talk to you about it, because I just felt emotionally stunted in high school because I just was not prepared, given no tools to handle it. And everybody I thought was more advanced than I was, like emotionally and mentally. I still looked like a little kid too. Like I didn't, I've always had a baby face. I always looked young. I kind of had, I was chubby. So I still I looked like a kid. And then I like see all these like guys with like muscles and facial hair, and like, I didn't even have any hair on my arms or my legs, and they're like full on like chest hair and everything. And I was like, where am I? So high school for me, like you, very much like you, I was just drawing and avoiding everybody. And I could not wait to graduate. And I think that's part of the reason I'm not a college graduate, and I don't, I'm okay with that. It took me a while to be okay with that. But I think because I, was so, and this is just in retrospect, of course, at the time I didn't know, but I think I didn't want to experience high school, like go into college. It took me a while. I did go to junior college for 2 years. But later in my early 20s, I had to take a break. Like I just couldn't do more of schooling and being, in groups and, having to deal with that dynamic. So I think that kind of like traumatized me from just continuing my education. But, I think I did okay for not having a formal education. I mean, I'm fine with that. And you just got to do what's right for you. You got to do what you feel is the right thing for you to do. A lot of people put expectations on you, your parents and society. And, you really, that just goes with the journey that comes with self-discovery and finding out who you are and what works for you and what doesn't work for you. It's part of the process.
Certainly is. I think that that's kind of universal. Like young people, even though we've gone through different things or different in these two different eras, young people's problems are the same. My specialty was working with youth in the last 20 years. And I could tell you that what they were complaining about and talking about 20 years ago are the same things now.
Yeah.
The only difference is they have cell phones and they communicate differently, but breakups are still the same.
Yeah.
Problems with mom and dad, stressed about school and homework, same things. So I don't know. I might have to say that our stresses, at least in my neighborhood, were a little bit intense, you know, compared to what some of my students were talking about.
Yeah.
It's like, man, like I remember drive-bys.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
So-
it's like, I mean, it's just a crazy, crazy world that we live in. But, this podcast is about self-expression and taking responsibility for your life. You're
Parent.
responsible for your own development. You know,
Yeah.
you're the master of your destiny. So, you know, if you want people to work for you and you want them to help you, you got to be putting in the effort.
Yeah.
Just as much as you can't expect one person to, you know, you're not a puppet that they're just pulling the strings and doing this. Like, you have to be the one putting just as much effort into your development as somebody like ourselves who are mentors and who mentor youth. It's like, we can't be the one, you know, we're not the string pullers. We're just the support system. But your development and the extent and how far you go with development is dependent on you. You know? So
Yeah, and it just depends on what direction people want to take, and like their perspective in particular. Like when people come up to me and they say, hey, I'm depressed. I always say, like, it appears you're depressed. I don't tell them they're depressed.
yeah.
It's just about appearance, you know? And so people tend to like own things when they shouldn't own them.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And sometimes they get a little upset. They're like, what do you mean appears? I'm depressed. And I'm like, well, yeah, but from my point of view, it appears that you are depressed. I'm not saying. I just try not to like reaffirm what they're saying.
Right. Yeah. Because that's the thing. You know, words. You know
They have power.
They have power, and you know the strongest words are the words that come out of your mouth or that are in your mind. You know that you can be your greatest enemy and your greatest critic if you allow those words to have power over you. So, you know, this is just touching the surface. You know, that's why I want to have other guests, especially youth, on here, because I think that they need a voice, and we need their perspective for, you know, to just kind of understand, you know, really what's going on. So, you know, on this podcast, you're gonna hear a lot of voices, and that's what I think. You know, I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. But hopefully collectively, with different voices and opinions, we can get an understanding of what the answer is. So I think that's going to conclude our podcast for tonight, because it's night.
Yeah, it's pretty late.
And yeah, so we've had a few technical difficulties, but we weathered the storm. And I think that we can officially feel good about it, right? Hopefully, fingers crossed.
I think we have a great setup so far, so I think we're okay.